Hello everyone and welcome back. So in today's video, we are going to talk about useRef, which is part of our React Hook series. In this video, we are going to have a general overview about useRef to understand what exactly is useRef and how it works, which includes how we can use useRef to access DOM elements and how we can use useRef to track component state. So for this and more, let's dive into it. Alright, so the first question is, what exactly is useRef? So useRef is basically a React hook that allows us to persist values between renders, okay? And it's used to store mutable values that doesn't cause the component to re-render when the data of the component updates, okay? And it can be used to access DOM elements directly. So if you are familiar with vanilla JavaScript from web development, uh, basically what you can do there, you can use useRef to achieve the same thing in React. Now, so before we even talk more about useRef, I would like us to first look at how we can implement it, okay? And then the first thing we are going to do is, of course, to import it into our application, okay? So from React, we are going to import useRef. So I'm just going to say import, and then from React, okay? And then inside it, I'm going to type useRef. Great. So this is how you import useRef basically, okay? And then in here is where you initialize it. So I'm going to say useRef and then, okay, let's say count, okay? And then I'll call out useRef right here. Yeah. So this is basically how you initialize useRef, okay? And then you can pass in some default value. So this time around, I would just want us to create a counter, okay? So count. So I'm just going to pass a default value, which is 0, okay? And then we are storing it right here. Now, if you want to have access to the value, which is 0, this is how you go with it. So you say count.current, okay? So useRef basically gives a current value or passes an object right here, okay? So it returns an object and that object is current. So no matter the value you pass in here, if you pass in a string, object, element, whatever you pass in here, useRef is going to return an object, and then the object is current, okay? And this current is where we are going to get our value, okay? So now I would like us to populate this. Of course, let me put this to in a div. So div, and I'm going to paste it right here, okay? So we are accessing 0, which is our default value, okay? We are accessing 0 through our useRef, and then the useRef kind of provide an object which is current, okay? So let me save this and then let's go to application. Our application is already up and running, so I'm just going to refresh it, okay? So we have welcome to Don't Have right here, and then we have our accounts here, okay? Now let's do some studies here, okay? I would like us to try and change the value of the count, okay? So I'm just going to say button. I'm going to create a button here, increase, okay? And I'm going to call on click here. I'm going to pass in an anonymous function right here, okay? So I'm just going to say count.current equals let's say 2, okay? And then let's save it. Now let's go back to application, okay? So let me add some color to the button. But before then, let me try and bring a break here just to push it to the next line, okay? Colors bg of red. Great. So now let's go back. So this is our button, right? Now when we click on it, I've clicked on it, nothing is happening. When I go back here and then let's try and click on Control Save just to save our application again. When we go back, we are seeing the update, right? So what this basically means is useRef, we can use useRef to change the state. So this is a state, right? We can use useRef to change the state, but then it doesn't cause re-render. That's why if we change the state and then, or when we click on increase, we don't see the update instantly. So with this one, when I click on it again, we don't see an update, right? But then when we go to application and then just click on save this file again, if you could see a flash here, you see there's a flash in the console, right? What basically happens is it updates or it re-renders the components, and that's why we are kind of seeing the updates, right? So this analogy basically backs the fact that useRef kind of help us to change values without re-rendering the component. Okay, so let me kind of increase my this one font size more for you guys. Okay, great, hope you can see it now. Yeah, so if you want to kind of get necessary impact when you are using useRef, let's say you want to kind of change the count value when a state changes, then you can go with this implementation. So I'm just going to create a variable. Okay, so let me say input value. Okay, and then I'm just going to say set input value, and then I'm going to call use state. Okay, I hope you already know what use state is. If you don't know, we have a video on that. Okay, let me clear this one right here, and then let me call use state inside here. Great. Right, let me bring this one down here. Okay, so I would like to create an input field. Okay, so I'm just going to say input. Great, and then inside it I'm going to give it a placeholder of, let's say, enter. Okay, and after giving it a placeholder of enter, I'm going to pass in the value, which is our state right here. So I'm going to pass in the input state right here. Okay, and then I have to pass in a function that is going to change the state whenever we enter something inside the input variable. Okay, so with this one I'm going to call an animal function, which we're going to get an event. Okay, so we're going to say set input variable, and then we are going to tap into the events.target.value. Okay, so this is going to grab the value, whichever value we input in the input element. Okay, and then it's going to save it inside our text or inside our set input value. Okay, so let me save this real quick. Okay, and let me try and add some style to it. So let me give it a border of blue. Okay, great, so that we can see it clearly. Great. Good. Let me bring a break before the count. So great. Let me cut this, paste it inside an H3. Great. I think we are good to go. So now let's go back. Great. So now when I type in something right here, okay, the value is actually changing, but then the count is not changing. So let me say count right here. Okay, and then after that, let me bring a comma and say value. And then let's bring the value right here. Okay, so input value. Great. Now let's go back. Let's refresh our application. Now when I type in something, you see we are getting the states right here. Okay, we can now use the changing state to update the count. Okay, so let me create a use effect. Okay, and then of course, as I said in our previous video, if you don't pass in any dependency here, this use effect is going to run or make the application mount whenever there is change in state. Okay, so whenever there is change in state, we can take that advantage to update our count. Okay, and what we are basically going to do here is we are going to call count.current. Okay, and then we are going to pass in count.current plus this. Okay, so this we are using it to track the change in our state. Okay, if you try to use, let's say, normal use state, maybe you create another count variable or whatever, and then you try to use that to kind of store updates of the re-render of the state itself, is always going to cause re-render, because this particular is a state, and this state causes re-render whenever you change something in it, right? So it makes perfect sense to kind of use useRef to store values that you wouldn't want the component to re-render when they change. Okay, so what I'm basically trying to explain to you is that now with this implementation, right, we can keep track of number of times this application has re-render. Okay, so whenever it re-renders, we can keep track of that using the useRef. If you try to use normal use state to keep re-render of that, we are going to be in an infinite loop. Okay, before we try that, let's take a look at what is happening. Okay, so with this, when we type in something, let's say food, okay, whenever we type, you could see there is a count right here, right? So it kind of help us to keep track. So now we could say that, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then initially it was 1. Okay, so we've made 5 changes, or this application or the component has mounted 5 times, right? We are able to do that with the help of the useRef. Now let's try this same method. Okay, so I'm just going to comment the useRef in a second. Let's try that same method using useState so that you could understand it properly. Okay, so set count, and I'm going to pass in 0 right here, and inside here I'm going to say set value, right, and then I'm going to pass in 0. Okay, and then not 0, I'm going to pass in, sorry, it's supposed to be set count. So set count, I'm going to pass in count plus 1. Okay, and then here I'm going to pass in our count right here. Okay, so now let's go back here, and then let's do a slight change here. So I'm just going to say count. Okay, now let's go back. You see what is happening? We've not even started, but you could see the count is actually doing it. So you find yourself in an infinite loop, okay, which is not a great thing, trust me, right? So that's why we have to use useRef in this state. Okay, so if you want to keep track of the state, or if you want to keep track of how many times your state mounts, right, you could use useRef, and I think that is the ideal function you should use, okay, or hook you should use. If you try to use useRef, or if you try to use useState, you will be found in an infinite loop. Okay, so let's go back to business. Okay, now what I want us to do is look at how we can use useRef to access DOM elements. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear these things out, and then I'm going to, for a second, let me clear everything inside here. Great. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Let me clear this one as well. Okay, you see previously when you try to manipulate the element ID, a second, let me come back again. Yeah, so you see when we try to, this is how, or the method we use when we wanted to have access to the changes that happens inside the input element, right? We kind of pass in a value right here, and then we call the onChange method, which we use to set the new value right here. Okay, we are going to look at a different way, a different approach where we can use our useRef to access the elements, okay, of the, or to access some properties or attributes of the input element, okay, so that we can manipulate it like vanilla JavaScript. Yeah, so in that case, this is how you do it. So you set up your useRef, and now here I'm just going to say input element, of course. So in element, right? Oops. Great. So I'm going to say input element, and then when I come here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my input right here. Okay, and I'm going to pass in a ref. So it have an attribute called ref, and then we are going to pass in our input element right here. Great. So with this, what we have basically done is we've kind of taken all of this, like let me come here, input, right? It's like we've taken this input element. Okay, it's like we've taken all this input element, and then we've passed it here as the initial value, right? That is basically what we mean when we say ref equals input element. Okay, So it means now when we call our input element dot current, okay, we are supposed to get all the attributes that comes with input element. I hope that sounds right. Okay, now let's do a quick demo on that. I'm going to create a button, okay, and what this button I intend it to do is kind of help me to create a focus around this input element. Okay, so let me clear this one from here, and I'm going to create a function called focus input. Okay, so once I click on this function, I want the element to get the attention, or should create a focus around this element. Okay, of course, which I think by default is going to create some black borderline around the element or the input element for us. So I'm just going to say input dot current dot focus. Okay, so this is a method, right, that triggers the focus. So I'm just going to come down here, and then not that, inside the button, and I'm going to use the on click, and then I'm going to pass in the focus. Okay, and then here I'm going to say focus input. So focus input. Great. Now let's save that, and you're not using useRef again, you're not using useState anymore, right? So now let's go back again. Oh my god, where is the, of course we can't see this one, right? So we can just add a placeholder just to have an idea of where our input element is located. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so it's right here. Okay, now when I click on this focus input, you see what happens? It kind of creates a focus around the input element for us. Okay, now let me do that. By default, unless you come and click inside here, right, but then we are able to kind of perform that same functionality by clicking on this focus input, right, which is very, very great. So we are able to manipulate this DOM. We are able to manipulate the element of the DOM using our useRef. Okay, so now if you look at how we can use useRef to change values without causing the component to re-render, okay, which is the first one we did. Now if you look at how we can use useRef to access elements in the DOM, now we can also use this same useRef to kind of keep track of the state of a component. Okay, so quickly let's go back to the basics, the how we started. So using useRef, so I'm going to say input value. Okay, input, why am I finding it difficult to type today? Input value, then set input value. So input values, let me make it value. Okay, then let me change this one to value as well. Then let's say use state. Great. I don't know why today, let me cut it from the top here, let me bring it right here. Okay, because they are all being imported from React, so it doesn't make sense for me to import them separately. Right now with this, we have our input element right here. Okay, so like how we started previously, I'm just going to call my value, and I'm going to pass in the input value. Great. And then I'm going to call my onChange. So onChange. Okay, and I'm going to pass in the function again. So set state value, then I'm going to say e dot target. Okay, dot value. Great. So this is kind of going to change it whenever we update. Okay, let me add some placeholder here, which says enter. Great. Now let me save it. Let me go back. I think we won't need this button again. Let me go back. Okay, so we have the enter here. Okay, so now what we are trying to do is we are now trying to use useRef to keep track of our elements. Okay, so basically I'm just going to remove this one from there and create a use effect. Okay, and inside this use effect, I'm going to say let me create previous I don't want what do you call input element again. So let me change it to, let's say, previous element or previous value. So previous value. Wait, forgive me today. I don't know. Just type in. Finding it difficult to type. So previous value dot current, right? So always remember useRef returns an object which is current. Okay. So with this we can now pass in our input value. Okay. And then we are now going to add a dependency which is the input value. So whenever the input value changes, we want to change the value of our useRef, the current value of our useRef. Okay. So now let me save that. And then let me come down here, create, let's say, BR, and then beneath it let me bring an h1 tag, and then here I'm just going to say previous value dot current. Okay, just to visualize our value we've stored in it. So let me go back, enter. Okay, so whatever you enter here, you can see it right here. Okay, and we are using this useRef to keep track of our value, which is our input value. Okay, so whenever there is change in the input value, we kind of store that value, the current value, inside our previous dot current. Okay, so now we are combining use effect, we are combining useRef and then use state to keep track of the value of our input element right here. Okay, so now we've been able to know how we can use useRef to also keep track of values or keep track of states in our application, which is awesome. Yeah, so in a quick recap, useRef is basically a hook, right? And then we use it to kind of hold values that doesn't cause re-render when application or when there is change in a state. Okay, so with this value inside here, whenever we change the value of this previous value, it doesn't cause the application to re-render. Okay, which is awesome. So when you are dealing with application, or we are building an application where you will want to change a value and then you don't want the application to re-render, then you have to store that value in useRef. Okay, and then you can use useRef to manipulate the DOM like how we do in vanilla JavaScript. Okay, and then you can use useRef to also keep track of the state or the data of your components. Yeah, I think the video is quite long, and I'm just going to end it here. Hope you really enjoyed it. If you did, kindly click on the subscribe button, like this video, share the video with friends, and see you in the next one. Happy coding.